we do have Moorehouse, who is a successful co-founder of EarthTech, which is an impact investing organization. And it is the fastest growing asset class in investment right now. So it's important to get on board. Adam Long, who is the ethical CEO and has some incredible companies in his portfolio, knows a lot about growth. You were Chief Growth Officer at Humanitix, as well as the co-founder of Conscious Step. Again, the impact part is so important. So you have a lot of knowledge to impart in terms of communicating that impact in a really meaningful way for consumers, customers in the market, as well as investors. And Franziska, Iseli, who's not only just a new mum, but also one of our top-rated rockstar mentors and imparting your incredible knowledge as well. So Franziska is an absolute marketing gun, founder of Basic Bananas, and also your swimwear and activewear label, Ocean Lovers, which is all about impacting positively our oceans.
Result, audience, message, medium as a flow. Whenever you hear someone starting in the other direction, say, hey, I've got a really good idea. Let's make a YouTube video. Stand up for them and take them through this process. Say, well, what are we actually trying to achieve? Who's the fewest we need to reach? What message do they need to hear? What's the best channel to put that on? So there are a couple of things we need to hear as quickly as possible in the pitch, which is who are you really helping? What problem are you solving for them? How are you solving and how are you charging? They're the 4 things that need to come out straight away.
I'm not sure if you have like a personal story or something like a little bit emotional that is the reason why you started this business. But if you do, I always find that pulls people in straight away when there's something a little bit emotional. And I come from a branding background, so I will always, that's I'm probably biased towards that, but I do find that pitches that have a bit of a story that is emotional and personal will be remembered. The second thing, again, this is from a branding perspective, a lot of slides that people use when they pitch are really ugly. When someone comes along with a pitch and slides that are just different, that are neat, that this has been thought through, also visually. Again, for probably 70% of the people listening who are visual, they will notice that because it will stand out.
The question I'll ask is who cares? And I mean that very specifically, like who's the audience that's going to care about this enough that they're willing to hand over money to make it happen? So there's an assumption here, there's somebody for whom this matters because it's their job, it's their KPIs, they're in charge of the budget. So we've got to find that person, number one. And so the question then is, what's the minimum we need to put in front of that person to get them to buy from you? And the good news is, it's actually not very much at all. It doesn't need to be a fully operational system because at this point of your business, what you're trying to do is work out, if you go and build this, will this person buy it? Now, all you need to do to find that out is put a PowerPoint in front of them. You can go and have these conversations with a PowerPoint deck and say, look, here's what I'm thinking. What would need to be true for you to buy this? That's the question. What would need to be true for you to buy this? And they will tell you either something needs to change on their end, like they need budget approvals, they need certain systems to change, or they'll tell you your product needs to change. It needs to measure these things. It needs to work in this way. It needs to...
Or where you're attaching your solution to another product that is trying to signal the intent to, be more sustainable. So for example, like doing an affinity deal with a company that sells garbage bags where, your solution gets offered to their customers, at a discount or something like that. Like ultimately you're looking for whoever's prepared to pay. And I'm not sure whether that's a direct payer or like a third party, but which is the time, what's your beachhead market in essence? What's your widget going to do to solve a small part of the problem very quickly? So I think another way to think about this problem, minimal viable product, is just to spin it back around to the customer. And what's the minimal viable experience? Like what's the experience that you're trying to give the customer? Whose core problem are you trying to solve? How do you find a way to go an inch wide and a mile deep first, prove that, and then go again? But if you can think about this from the customer experience perspective, and then work out how you can sort of just take one little part of the problem and go deep, that's going to be the best way to work out what the product looks like, work out what team you need to build around that, and therefore how much money you need to make it happen. And then that's a more believable story to investors, because you're always at risk of being perceived to be trying to boil the ocean. And that's a bit of a no-no.
Fantastic mentors here. Would you be able to all just share your top piece of advice
I think that the big thing is that it's not about what we want to say, it's about what our audience needs to hear. And that was a lesson I learned really the hard way with my first business, which was all about sustainable manufacturing. But I was talking to people who needed to hear a very different message from what I was going out with. And I was always told, back when I went to entrepreneurial events in the 2000s, people were saying, it's all about passion. You just got to believe in what you do more than anybody else does. But if nobody else believes in it, then you're not going to get a sale. So it's all about empathy and understanding what does your audience need to hear. Don't
compromise. Sometimes there are easier ways to do something, but maybe they're not better ways. And it's just one example would be, for one of our labels, Ocean Lovers, especially initially, there were way easier ways to make these suits and use fabrics that are not sustainable or less sustainable or, kind of sustainable. So, and it's very tempting to go down that path because it's cheaper and it's quicker and it's easier. But I think if we take a pledge to whatever we do, like, for example, pledge to the ocean, we have to make sure that we're sticking to it and that the whole supply chain is also in order. Otherwise, we're hypocritical, and eventually that will, bite us in the butt long term. If you're a massive company, suddenly.
Don't try to boil the ocean. When Amazon was able to sell some books online, really simple, really very linear process, and that enabled them to kind of do everything from sending people into space to running most of the businesses, internets in the world, to everything else in between. But they started just trying to ship books from a buyer to a seller.
Thank you all so much for your incredible mentorship, advice, and these masterclasses on how to measure, manage, and importantly, communicate impact. I think the overwhelming message here is that you need to be solving a customer problem first and foremost. Solving the most pressing challenges that our world face are so important because it does attract customers, but you have to communicate it with value. It does attract more investment, but you have to be able to articulate that impact correctly, because impact washing is a thing, and we're in an era of radical visibility, and saying something and not really following through with it is not going to fly anymore. Having those aspirational targets of being the most sustainable brand in the world, but your supply chain isn't up to scratch, doesn't fly. So thank you so much for your time. I've learned so much and I'm so appreciative of it. So thank you so much for your time. We are on a mission to create the next gen of sustainable entrepreneurs.